Story of a scientist who keeps a group of inmates inside a prison and uses them for his own benefit, putting them through horrifying and disturbing experiments that force them to live through hell every single day. But one day, some of those inmates do something to that scientist that he never even imagined was possible. So what kind of twisted experiments was he carrying out on those inmates, and what exactly did they do to him? Let's find out. The story begins with a plane carrying several inmates as it lands on a beautiful island. That's where they're taken to a unique prison called Spiderhead, a facility unlike any other. Every inmate is given every comfort imaginable. They each have their own private room, complete freedom to spend their time however they like, and they're even free to walk around the facility whenever they want. Everything about the place feels perfect until its real purpose slowly comes into focus. But in exchange for all those comforts, the inmates are used as human test subjects for experimental chemicals designed to control human emotions. Those experiments are performed directly on their bodies, making every privilege part of a much darker bargain. Every reward they receive comes with a hidden cost they can't escape. To deliver those chemicals, every inmate permanently wears a small device attached to their lower back. Those devices are called Moby Packs. What appears to be paradise is actually a prison built around human experimentation. Every time the inmates were about to receive a new dose, they were asked for their consent first. The experiment only began after they acknowledged and agreed to it. Every one of these tests was supervised by the brilliant scientist Steve Abnesti and his assistant, Mark. Today, they're testing a drug called G46 on an inmate named Ray. Under the effects of G46, Ray bursts into uncontrollable laughter, even at Steve's terrible jokes. Mark starts reading tragic events from history out loud, but the drug keeps Ray laughing non-stop. Steve knows the drug is working exactly the way he hoped it would. Seeing the results, Steve is thrilled. He records every detail of the test in his notebook, then proudly places a gold star sticker beside the entry to mark the experiment as a success. The next morning, an inmate named Jeff is blindfolded and escorted outside the building for a special test. After receiving a dose of a drug called N40, the blindfold is removed. Suddenly, everything around Jeff looks unbelievably beautiful, but he can't find the words to describe what he's seeing. The world hasn't changed, only the way Jeff's mind experiences it. He's given another dose, and this time the words come effortlessly. Jeff begins describing the breathtaking scenery with remarkable beauty, almost like he's reciting poetry. For a brief moment, the drug transforms ordinary reality into something unforgettable. But as soon as the test is over and everyone starts heading back, Jeff realizes he's actually standing in a filthy, run-down area. Back at the facility, he joins another inmate, Lizzie, who's working in the kitchen, and helps her prepare food. The truth is, Jeff really likes Lizzie. The two of them are in charge of making snacks, and that's exactly why Jeff enjoys the assignment. It gives him a chance to spend more time with her and talk while they work together. Even inside a prison, small moments of connection still find a way. As they cook, they often talk about the strange experiments they're forced to go through. Later that evening, Jeff sits alone in his room, carefully sketching unusual drawings inspired by everything that's happened. But it isn't easy. Whenever he starts thinking too deeply, his mind drifts back to the past, and the memories that brought him to Spiderhead come rushing back. The scene shifts to that night in the past, where Jeff is enjoying a party with his best friend, Adam, and his girlfriend, Emma. Some memories never stay buried, no matter how hard someone tries. Jeff had far too much to drink that night. While driving home, he crashed his car into a tree while intoxicated, and the accident killed his best friend, Adam. That single mistake is the reason he's now trapped inside Spiderhead. The scene shifts back to the present, where Jeff is taken with another inmate named Heather for the next experiment. Before the test begins, Steve carefully confirms that the two of them have never met before. He then asks whether they find each other attractive, and both of them give almost the same answer. Not really. Everything changes the moment a single dose enters their systems. Mark administers a dose of N40, and almost instantly, Jeff and Heather become overwhelmingly attracted to each other. Neither of them can control their emotions, and right there, with the cameras rolling and the scientists watching, they become physically intimate. They tell each other, "I love you," and behave as if they're deeply in love. Steve and Mark are pleased with the results, but Steve doesn't place a gold star in his notebook just yet, because he wants to observe the lingering effects of N40 before declaring the test a success. Later, while meals are being served, Jeff brings food over to Heather as well, but now they behave like complete strangers, barely even speaking to each other. Steve decides to run the experiment again, but this time he chooses an elderly woman instead. Jeff refuses at first, but after receiving a double dose, he once again loses all control and falls just as deeply under the drug's influence. The drug controls feelings so completely that resistance becomes impossible. Later, when Mark comes to refill Jeff's Moby Pack, he explains that the device is extremely delicate. Even a small impact could damage it and cause it to malfunction. One damaged device could throw the entire experiment completely out of control. That's why Mark warns Jeff to be careful whenever he's physically intimate with any of the female inmates. Seizing the opportunity, Jeff asks Mark to change his work assignment. He says he's bored with kitchen duty and just wants a change, but he doesn't reveal the real reason behind the request. Jeff is hiding far more than he's willing to admit. The next morning, Jeff is surprised to discover that he's been reassigned to work alongside Steve and Mark at the scientist's workstation. For the next experiment, 2 separate rooms are prepared. Dave is placed in one room, where he's busy eating a huge amount of food. In the other room, Heather and Sarah are waiting. Steve tells Jeff that the test is simple. He has to choose one of the 2 women to receive a dose of Darkenflox, a drug Steve describes as highly stimulating but says causes no permanent harm. Jeff feels uncomfortable and refuses to choose either of them. Still, he makes one thing clear. If he absolutely had to choose, he'd pick one at random. His refusal isn't about the women, it's about the experiment itself. Jeff explains that he has no feelings for either woman. The only reason he's refusing is because he knows exactly what that drug feels like, and he hated every second of it. Steve is impressed by the answer because Jeff had previously been given different doses with both women, yet the final results had been exactly the same. For Steve, matching outcomes matter far more than human emotions ever will. A little while later, Lizzie walks over to Jeff and asks why he wanted his work assignment changed. Before he can answer, a guard tells Jeff that he has the day off. After leaving the building, Jeff tries calling his girlfriend, Emma, but just like every other time, the call doesn't go through. Instead, he's forced to leave a voicemail. Some conversations are never heard, only left behind as messages. In the voicemail, Jeff apologizes, tells Emma how much he misses her, and this time he even mentions Lizzie. In the next scene, Jeff is assigned to share a room with a large, muscular inmate named Rogan. No drug is administered before they're placed together, but something about it doesn't sit right with Jeff. He goes to Steve's office to find out what's happening, and learns that Heather had been ordered to choose either Rogan or Jeff to receive a dose of Darkenflox, but she refused to choose either of them. That also means she had already been involved with Rogan during an earlier experiment. The truth leaves Jeff questioning every relationship inside Spiderhead. Furious, Jeff wants to know whether every inmate has been forced through the same experiments. Steve explains that every connection between the inmates was part of a mandatory test ordered from higher up. Jeff argues that the experiments have crossed every ethical line, but Steve quickly reminds him of one thing: he's still an inmate. Inside Spiderhead, the inmates don't decide where the boundaries are, and if Jeff refused to participate in the experiments, he would be sent back to a traditional prison, where he would have to face the torture of a cruel prison guard. Jeff didn't want to lose the comfort and privileges he had at Spiderhead, so he apologizes to Steve and agrees to be ready for the next test with Rogan. Luckily, Heather also refuses to give the dose to either of them, and the test gets canceled. Jeff chooses comfort over the terrifying reality waiting outside. After that, Steve says that before giving the test a gold star, both of them will also have to experience it themselves. Jeff feels uncomfortable hearing this, but Steve convinces him by saying the experiment is necessary to make the world a better place. Eventually, Jeff agrees. What the inmates don't know is that they also have MobiPack devices attached to their backs. Later, while having dinner, Jeff tells Lizzie how horrible it feels when Darkenflox is injected into the body. During their conversation, Lizzie holds Jeff's hand and asks why he wanted to change his assignment. Jeff reveals how this place slowly affects his memories and mind. Jeff tells her that his mind doesn't work properly in this place. Sometimes, he even forgets who he was with before he arrived there. He tells Lizzie that being around her makes him feel better. The following Monday, Steve decides to take a risk and asks Mark to give him a triple dose. That's when Jeff arrives and sees what they're preparing. The experiment is about to cross a dangerous new boundary, but the 2 scientists quickly remove everything before Jeff can understand what he saw, so he says nothing and prepares for the next experiment. Steve tells him that the committee has ordered them to continue testing Darkenflox. Since Steve had already placed Jeff under control by giving him certain chemicals, Jeff has no real choice. He gives Heather a dose of N40, and the drug immediately causes her extreme pain. Mark then gives Jeff a dose of B15, which allows him to describe Heather's inner pain and fear in a strangely beautiful and emotional way. Jeff finally sees the suffering hidden behind every experiment. Jeff even admits that he doesn't love Heather. Meanwhile, Heather becomes overwhelmed by panic and fear. During the chaos, the MobiPack attached to her back breaks, causing the Darkenflox dose to spread throughout her entire body. The drug takes complete control of her, and she begins acting uncontrollably. She breaks a vase and uses a piece of it to take her own life. Mark and Steve rush into the room to save her, but Steve's keyring falls on the way. Inside the room, Mark and Steve start arguing about everything that happened to Heather. A single failed test exposes the true horror behind Spiderhead. While they're distracted, Jeff picks up the fallen keys and begins searching through Steve's belongings. Eventually, he finds Steve's notebook, which reveals shocking new information. The secrets inside that notebook change everything Jeff believed. Jeff discovers a chemical called OBDX, written on a piece of paper along with people's names. This makes one thing clear: there was never any committee. Steve himself was the operator and owner of the company. The second thing Jeff Jeff notices is a bingo card where every number except 6 and N40 has a gold star placed on it. The numbers beneath those stars match the chemical numbers that had already been tested on the inmates. Every gold star represents another experiment already completed. The N40 drug, which was supposed to create true love, had still failed to achieve the desired result, which is why it had not received a star yet. B6 was the drug Mark had been adding into everyone's Moby packs.
Before Jeff can discover anything else, he sees Steve returning. He quickly puts everything back in place and throws the keyring back onto the floor. Later, Mark asks Steve to report what happened, but Steve refuses. Steve tells Mark that reporting the incident would force them to shut down the entire experiment because they crossed their limits a long time ago, and now they can't stop. Steve knows the experiment is broken, but refuses to let go. After that, Steve goes to meet Jeff, who is devastated by Heather's death. He tries to comfort him, but Jeff isn't convinced by anything Steve says, so Steve takes another approach. He gives both himself and Jeff a dose of the same chemical he previously tested on Ray. Steve turns to the same drug that started everything. The chemical makes both of them laugh uncontrollably, and while they are laughing, Steve suddenly tells Jeff that his father left him when he was a child. Jeff laughs and asks him why he never leaves this place like Mark did. Steve tells him that this project is his true love, which is why he can never leave this place. Steve reveals his deepest pain while laughing under chemical effects. For the next experiment, Lizzie is chosen and given a chemical that makes her afraid of everything. Even seeing something as simple as a stapler makes her scream in fear. After the experiment, she shares all her pain and embarrassment with Jeff. Jeff understands what she is going through and tells her that this is exactly why he had his duty changed. Lizzie questions why comfort is worth their painful experiments. Lizzie cannot understand how they agree to these experiments just for a little comfort. Jeff then tells her about what happened to him and says that he deserves all of this. Talking about the incident that happened months ago, Jeff explains that on the night he drove while drunk, the accident killed not only his friend Adam, but also his girlfriend Emma. Since then, he has been living with the guilt. Their shared pain brings Jeff and Lizzie closer together. Hearing this, Lizzie goes to him and comforts him, and then they start kissing each other. Later, while they are eating together, Jeff gets an idea and tells Lizzie about his plan. Meanwhile, after seeing Jeff sketching Lizzie through the security system, Steve becomes convinced that his experiment is working correctly. After that, he takes a dose of N40 and goes to bed. The next day, Steve calls Jeff again for another test and tells him to give Lizzie a dose of Darkenflox. Jeff refuses to continue Steve's cruel experiments any further, but Jeff refuses, so Steve lets him leave without saying anything. Steve then tells Mark to double Jeff's B6 dose. However, when Mark goes to Jeff's room to give him the dose, Jeff objects. He tells Mark that he knows there is no committee, and that B6 is not the most important thing for Steve. Mark finally admits the truth behind his broken promises. Mark tells Jeff what he truly feels. He says he wanted to work with a genius scientist, and he was promised that everything they were doing was for the good of the world. That is why he agreed to join the project, but now, even he regrets it. Jeff understands what Mark is saying, and they make a plan together to deal with everything. Their alliance begins against the experiment they once supported. After that, Mark goes home for the weekend. The next Monday, Mark cannot come because he is sick, so Steve and Jeff are alone in the testing room. Steve tells Jeff to give Lizzie the Darkenflox dose, but Jeff refuses again. This makes Steve angry, and he cannot understand how two people can fall in love after being locked together in the same place for only a few months. Steve tries to reduce Jeff's love for Lizzie by making Lizzie confess her crime. Crying, she explains that she accidentally left her baby locked inside a car, which caused her death. Then she asks Jeff to give her the chemical. Jeff presses the control screen, but the chemical affects Steve instead of Lizzie, causing him to laugh uncontrollably. Mark secretly changed the controls before the final experiment. Actually, Mark had only pretended to be sick and had already changed the control programming. He also had an extra dose of B6 added to Steve's Moby pack, so Steve would remain completely under their control. After Jeff gives Steve the fear chemical, he also gives him the Darkenflox dose, causing Steve to suffer in unbearable pain. Jeff exposes the truth behind Steve's dangerous obsession. Jeff tells him that Mark is bringing the police and that he has discovered what kind of experiment this really is. B6 is a chemical used to control people so they can be forced to do whatever someone wants. And OBDX comes from obedience, with a play on the word obedience. Steve still thinks B6 could have been perfected. Even while suffering in pain, Steve thinks that B6 could have been used in a better way. He believes B6 failed to suppress deep human emotions, which is why his experiment was never completely successful. Steve tells Jeff and Lizzie that their sentences had already ended long ago, but he never told them. Jeff's anger finally reaches its breaking point. Hearing this, Jeff becomes furious and pushes Steve's head toward the table. Jeff forces him to press his finger on the control panel and open the front door. He wants to escape through that opening and
reveal the truth about Heather's death to the entire world. But as he steps outside, Jeff sees Steve walking toward him with a knife in his hand. Jeff immediately orders him to hand over the knife, but even after receiving extra doses of B6, Steve refuses to obey Jeff's command. This clearly proves that the chemical was not completely successful in suppressing a person's true emotions. The experiment was failing because human feelings were stronger than chemicals. This project was so important to Steve that he was willing to risk his own life to protect it. After attacking Jeff, Steve takes control back and gives Lizzie 4 doses of Darkenflox, causing her condition to instantly become like a complete mental breakdown. Steve's obsession with the project pushes him beyond his limits. Jeff attacks Steve and knocks him down, and the two of them begin fighting each other. During their struggle, the control device falls to the ground and breaks. Jeff keeps hitting Steve and pushes him into the wall, causing Steve's mobipack to break apart. One final fight decides who escapes and who falls. As the chemicals suddenly spread through Steve's body, he becomes weaker. Seeing his chance, Jeff pushes him away, takes his keys, and runs to save Lizzie. Luckily, he reaches her in time and removes the mobipack from her body. Lizzie apologizes for not telling him about her crime earlier, but Jeff tells her she doesn't need to worry because he still loves her. As Jeff and Lizzie prepare to leave the facility, Steve makes an announcement through the microphone. He tells all the prisoners that if they want to keep their privileges, they must stop Jeff and Lizzie. Steve then notices the security camera footage and sees the police approaching the building. Because of this, he grabs all the important chemicals and escapes from the facility. Steve believes he can escape, but fate is already waiting. Meanwhile, Jeff and Lizzie are stopped by Sarah and Ray while trying to get out. The two fight back, escape from them, and continue running. Then Dave also tries to stop them, but Lizzie easily gets rid of him by giving him the pantry key. The remaining prisoners also try to catch them, but Jeff and Lizzie move quickly and reach the final hallway. They lock the door behind them, leaving everyone trapped inside. The escape seems impossible until they finally reach freedom. Outside, they see Steve leaving in his private plane, so Jeff and Lizzie take a motorboat and escape from the island as well. When Mark arrives there with the police, he realizes Steve has already left, but there is no need to worry. Because of the effects of N40, Steve sees a beautiful view in front of him instead of the mountain. Believing the illusion, he flies his plane directly into the mountain. In the end, truth defeats the illusion created by chemicals. Jeff finally realizes that people don't need chemicals to forgive their mistakes. They need the real emotions and honesty that already exist inside them.